What up, Cucks? It's your boy, the Hater, and one of my friends messaged me telling me that all of a sudden the Supreme Court of the United States of America has overturned affirmative action. Now, people have already asked the Hater on his thoughts on this. Now, the Hater, as many of you know, is a very well-educated man. The Hater has graduated from law school and passed the bar exam several times, might I add. So anyways, the Hater knows a lot about this. You know, it gets a little goofy around here sometimes because I talk the way I do, and this is basically how I am in real life. But I know the law like the back of my balls, motherfuckers. So let me talk to you a little bit about this. Now, is it good or is it bad? That's the number one question that everyone should be asking, right? The short answer to this is nobody knows, right? In my personal opinion, ending affirmative action is more of a good thing than a bad thing. Now, the Hater has never been accused of being a liberal or an SJW, but the Hater will say that there's definitely a benefit to giving certain people of certain racial groups an opportunity, right, that otherwise may be taken from them, right? A lot of people misunderstand affirmative action, and they think that it's just, oh, if you're black, you just get into Harvard. No, motherfucks. The argument is this. If you are very close, and there's someone that's also very close, you might give it to the minority, right? Because the implication and the assumption is that the minority has had a harder life. Now, that's not always true, of course. We all know that. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I'll tell you this. In the Hater's line of work, right, the Hater has to talk to a lot of people. The Hater is a handsome, white man, if I do say so myself. And as a result, I believe that this has benefited me in terms of getting clients and talking to people, right? That's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I do believe that it has. So I would be a hypocrite if I didn't acknowledge the benefits. However, the negatives of affirmative action, in my opinion, far outweigh them. And I will use this example of one of the Hater's very, very close friends, who obviously we're not going to name. This is one of my friends from the first day of middle school. I've been friends with this guy. I was a groomsman at his wedding, and he will certainly be one at mine when the time comes. And he is a very, very good person and a very, very close friend to the Hater. Now, this young man, who is now actually in his 30s, so he's not a young man anymore, he is from Africa. He is black, right? And his family had all two of his siblings. He's one of four. Two of his siblings, and then eventually him himself, shut up, Ridge, and him himself have gone on to a very prestigious university in the United States. And with that being said, the Hater always thought that this young man and his family are very, very brilliant people. And that is actually the truth, because I've met his family and I know him very well, right? So, despite the fact that I have absolutely zero doubts that my very good friend deserved to get into this university, right? There's absolutely zero doubt in my mind. Unfortunately, people throughout his life have questioned him, right? They have said, hey, perhaps it's because of affirmative action that you got in. And I always thought that was bullshit, right? Because he busted his ass. Few people know how hard he worked to get into that university, right? And for some jabron to then come out of the woodworks and say, hey, I think you got there through affirmative action is a bunch of horse shit, right? What about people like him? As a matter of fact, I believe that the negatives of affirmative action are exactly that, right? That otherwise qualified black people who would have gotten to Yale and Harvard and MIT and Stanford and all these places, irrespective of their race, will always be judged as having gotten there because of their race, right? And that is the biggest correction that the Supreme Court has done. A lot of people aren't going to talk about this because for two reasons. Number one, doesn't fit the narrative, but more importantly, quite frankly, they're just not smart enough, motherfuckers. They just don't get it, you know what I'm saying? But the Hater is, and the Hater gets it. So that's what I think about that. Now, other benefits, of course, are that things are going to become more meritocratic, right? Now, there is a problem there because the truth is the truth. Now, the Hater has never been poor, but the Hater has never been rich either. Well, that's in the old country, the Hater's family was very well off, and in the new country, in America, we did pretty well for ourselves. I'm not going to pretend that we're poor or anything. Absolutely not. Far from it. But we're not like multimillionaires, right? We're not, the fucking Kennedys, motherfucks. Why do you think I'd do this? If I were a Kennedy, you think I'd be talking to you guys about wrestling and affirmative action? Fuck no. I'd be out there doing whatever the hell it is that Kennedys do. But anyways, I have had access to a variety of positive things, including good schooling, right? I was never one for tutors, right? In terms of, I never wanted tutors for myself. I have tutored countless people. I have consulted countless people. But I've never been one to take advice from people because, quite frankly, and quite honestly, I've been a bit arrogant throughout my whole life. So that would never work for me. But I did have access to that. And some of the haters' peers had access to one-on-one tutoring, which helped improve their SAT scores. Now, other people don't have access to this. And the facts are what the facts are, right? If you're being honest, right? People do benefit from having wealth, obviously, right? And standardized test scores are not exactly standardized because they don't take into account, I should say, all these other metrics, right? This is something that people on the right try to ignore all the time. It's very strange because it's a fucking fact of life, right? Just like the morons on the left ignore the other things, like the fact that affirmative action doesn't work and that you are stigmatizing the intellectuals who happen to be black, right? It gets to a point where you look at someone who went to law school and they're black and people assume, shit, this person didn't deserve to be there. Maybe he fucking did, motherfucks. Not every black person that gets into law school did so because only of affirmative action. Absolutely not. And we also have other programs that give benefits to people. So for example, if you're a military student, the probability of you getting to a good school is much, much higher than if you're like a high school graduate, right? Maybe that's fair, maybe that's not. I don't really see how it connects personally, but those people do get a leg up. So this country is full of people getting a leg up. So I never thought that it was like the worst thing ever to give, let's say, black people a leg up, right? Because the truth is that many of them are discriminated on the micro level all the time, motherfuckers. All the time people discriminate, but they discriminate against white people too, don't get me wrong. I see it all the time. Your boy sees it all the time. But the truth is what the truth is, and we all know. We all know that not everyone is treated equally. Case in point, motherfuckers. A recent study found that if you looked at Tinder profiles, right, they basically, this study created a hierarchy of who is more desirable in terms of Tinder, right? And strangely enough, white men in the men category were by far the most desirable, right? More women were likely to swipe, whatever the fuck it is, to swipe yes on the white men. I think it's swipe right, right? To swipe right on the white men, right? And then black men were at the bottom of this category, right? So insofar as that goes, there's definitely a stigma that is associated with being black and specifically being a black male. Likewise, black women were at the bottom in this Tinder study, right? And actually, Asian women, who would have thought, were number one in terms of people more likely to swipe right on them. So if you take this into account, I understand this is a crude survey about Tinder, but the facts are what the facts are. If I put myself on a website where I might advertise myself as a freelancer and they see a blue-eyed white boy, right? They don't know that I talk like this, motherfuckers. I don't look the way I talk, cocksuckers, you know what I'm saying? So they see a blue-eyed, handsome white boy, they might think, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. You know? Oh, he wants to do consulting? Oh, he knows what he's doing. Oh, he has an air of knowledge about him, right? They'll assume things about me because I'm white, right? And I know this is true. And if anyone's honest, they know that's true, right? So, the same way, the opposite happens. However, affirmative action was never the choice, motherfuckers. It was never the solution. Because the problem is that affirmative action is a form of race hustling. And in my opinion, it's disrespectful to black people and other minorities, right? To tell them, hey, you're not good enough, so we're going to give you a boost. If I were me, I'd tell them to go fuck yourself. You know what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, when the hater was in high school, there was this girl in the hater's high school. I didn't know her personally, but our English teacher told us about her in AP language. She was not in my class, as I just said. She was in another AP language class. And this young woman was applying for universities. And she asked our English teacher to write a recommendation. I think she was from a different year or some shit. This was in the past, motherfucks. And the teacher was like, sure, you're a brilliant student. I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation. My English teacher in the high school that I went was actually quite legit in the sense that she was respected. If she wrote you a letter of recommendation, it was going to be the bomb and you'd probably get in. You know what I mean? She was one of those. She's like an institution in this area and also in academics, at least at the high school level, right? And this girl went to my teacher for advice, and the girl was black, and she told my teacher, I don't want to put black on the application because I don't want preferential treatment. So think about what this girl had to do. She had to go and write white for her race in order to not receive the extra points that she did not want to receive because she was an ethical human being. My teacher, who was white, promptly told her, have you lost your mind? Just put you're black. You want every advantage you can get, right? Which is true, but it also comes with a slew of negatives, right? Especially for this girl who didn't want to do that, right? Now, as the hater has explained, affirmative action is over to an extent, but it's not completely over, right? They can still make certain considerations. If you read the opinion, they can still make certain considerations based on race. They just cannot base it only on race, right? That was kind of already the standard. So this is not really like this huge change, if we're being honest, right? But the idea is they can take into account, for example, the way that race has impacted you, right? So in other words, it doesn't really mean much. It's more of like a shitty moral victory for some people and a shitty moral defeat for some others. And with that being said, there it is, motherfuckers. Everything you need to know about affirmative action. Now suck my balls.